It is 10 o'clock. We're going to begin this gathering by acknowledging and celebrating these traditional lands as a gathering place of the first peoples and their ancestors who are entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. We do so respecting both the land and the Indigenous people who continue to walk with us through this world. Today, the county is committed in working with Indigenous peoples and all residents to pursue a united path of reconciliation. We're going to open our meeting, our public meeting, to deal with Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee. And I have some information to impart to everyone before we start. Notice of collection. Personal information collected as a result of this public meeting is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on these matters. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes, which will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to Jeanette Amini, Manager of Legislative Services Clerk. The purpose of the public meeting is to present planning applications in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. The following presentations by the applicant, the meeting will then be open to the public for comments and questions. Interested persons are requested to give their name and address for recording in the minutes. Subject to any concerns being raised at the public meeting, staff will be making a recommendation to the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee regarding the official plan amendment at the same meeting. The recommendation of the committee will be presented to County Council at their next regular meeting. The Planning Advisory Committee is conducting a public meeting under the Planning Act. The meeting is in respect to adopting Plan Amendment number 3 to the County of Frontenac's official plan to recognize the use of communal water and wastewater services for new development across Frontenac County. I will ask the executive assistant to advise the method by which the notice of meeting was given and confirmation as to the date that notice was given.
As required by the Planning Act, a notice of statutory public meeting was provided by advertisement in the Frontenac News 20 days in advance of the public meeting. In addition, the notice was also posted on the County of Frontenac's website.
Thanks, Brianna. Any persons who wish to receive a copy of the minutes of either public meeting, a copy of either staff report, or the notice of decision on either file shall indicate their full name, address, and postal code to the clerk prior to leaving the meeting today. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the County of Frontenac before the proposed applications are approved or adopted, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decisions of the County of Frontenac to the Ontario Land Tribunal and may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. The procedure for each public meeting will be as follows. County planning staff will be asked to explain the purpose of the public meeting. If there's any applicants, they would be provided an opportunity to present their proposal. I will then inquire if there are any persons present who wish to speak to the application and information. If so, you should announce your name and state your address, and then you will be given an opportunity to address the committee. The applicant will be given an opportunity to respond to any issues and questions arising from the public comments after all comments have been received. Please be aware that all persons wishing to address the issues should direct their comments and questions through the chair. I would also note that personal information collected as a result of this public meeting is collected under the authority of the Municipal Act, the Municipal Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act, MFIPA, the Planning Act, and all other relevant legislation, and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All personal information as defined by MFIPA, including but not limited to name, addresses, opinions, and comments collected, will be made available for public disclosure to members of the public at the meeting through requests and through the website of the Corporation of the County of Frontenac. Questions regarding the collection, use, and disclosure of this personal information may be directed to the Manager of Legislative Services Clerk. So Sonia, we will let you get started and then we'll see if we have anyone who wishes to speak.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to you and members of the committee and ladies and gentlemen. For the benefit of the members of the public attending both in person online, my name is Sonia Bolton. I'm the manager of community planning for the County of Frontenac. So today we have a county initiated amendment to the county official plan. It's amendment number 3. It is specifically to include policies about communal services in the county official plan. Are we able to show the presentation? I just have a few slides to share. Great, and if we could just go to the next slide. Thanks, Brianna. So just as a little bit of background, the work that the county has been doing on communal services has spanned the last 6 or 7 years. Oh, we've lost it again.
Through you, Chair, one moment. I'm just going to share it on our YouTube. It's just going to take one moment. Here.
Okay. I can keep going. I don't need the slide. I mean, we'll get back to that when we do. We're good. Okay. Thank you. So yeah, the work that the county has been doing on communal services has spanned the last 6 or 7 years, and it stemmed from some discussions after the county official plan was done in 2016, looking at future development, particularly in our settlement areas and our villages and hamlets. None of our villages or hamlets have what are known as municipally supplied water and sewer services. The one exception being the village of Sydenham, where we are today. They do have municipally supplied water, but that is the only form of municipal servicing anywhere else in the county. And in our historical settlement areas, we also have very, very small building lots. So today, by today's standard of development, if you are developing on private services, you need a minimum of 2 acres. So to do full municipally owned services requires a significant public investment in terms of the infrastructure. Also, our villages and hamlets are where the majority of our commercial assessment is as well. So which is why the county started its research with respect to communal services. Next slide, please. So essentially, this is directly from the county official plan, which highlighted the fact that that lack of municipal services in our villages is sort of challenges that future viability in terms of those villages to be able to grow in a way that is appropriate and compatible. So continuing to do lots and settlement areas on 2 acre lots is not sustainable. So next slide, please. So the county embarked on a study with respect to communal services. The technology and the engineering to provide communal services has been around for some time. The reason that it has not been used extensively in Ontario is that the province, if you are doing it particularly for residential development, the province requires the developer to enter into a municipal responsibility agreement with the municipality, which basically means that if anything fails or the developer walks away, the municipality is responsible for taking over that system. And that is a significant financial liability for the municipalities, particularly those with smaller tax bases and assessments. So often what would happen is the municipality would ask for securities equal to the cost of the installation of the system, which then makes it completely unaffordable and the developers walk away. So we found through the study that technically it is feasible, but it's this municipal responsibility agreement that's sort of the legal side of things that's a bit of a hang up. So if we can go on to the next slide. After the initial study, we went a little bit further and we looked at a governance model. So was there a way around this municipal responsibility agreement? And that is where the county has come up with the idea of creating a municipal service corporation, which is essentially, it's a public utility. The members of the board would be the members, like there would be members from each of the 4 townships. The county would not be a voting member on that. And that corporation is a separate legal entity from the county and the other townships. So they are able to assume the responsibility of any of these communal systems that are built in the future. They can also take them over and ensure that they're maintained replaced, upgraded as needed as any other public utility would. So just as an example on the next slide, so these show that the three main, there's the conventional municipal system, which you see in urban areas. There are private on-site systems, which is currently what we have in most of Frontenac. And then you have communal systems, also known as decentralized systems, because they are actual water and wastewater treatment systems. They're just done at a much smaller scale. Next slide, please. So again, there are environmental advantages to moving to communal systems, particularly environmental advantages. So there's better environmental protection and public health than you would get with private on-site services. There are fewer malfunctions and a longer life to the system. And when it is overseen by a public utility, it's ensured that there's regular maintenance. They can measure the performance, they can monitor impacts, and they fix problems early so that things, don't get out of hand. Next slide, please. And there are advantages from a community planning perspective as well. When you have communal services or decentralized systems, you can build, you don't have to build on 2-acre lots, you can build on smaller lots. That allows for a better fit with our existing hamlets and our villages. It can strengthen the local economy and your community infrastructure, such as keeping your schools and post offices and banks open, because you have more people living in those communities using those facilities, and it creates a more, excuse me, a more walkable community. Next slide, please. So in terms of the amendment itself to the official plan, it's really enabling in nature. So our purpose with this amendment is to outline, why we have been doing the work we have on communal services and how it is going to support development and redevelopment across all of the Frontenacs. It's going to allow each of the townships to be able to consider having a variety of housing options, rather than right now, it's mostly single detached dwellings, right? So you can allow for a higher density of development on communal services. So even things like townhouses or a small scale, like 3-story apartment buildings, such as like Country Pines, which is on the county campus. Next slide, please. And we're also looking to recognize that communal services can be used to support economic development in terms of potentially new business parks or other commercial uses that otherwise wouldn't necessarily be viable if they had to develop on a standard well and septic system. And the policies are also going to recognize that the county is creating this regional public utility that is going to operate and manage these systems, which ensures public oversight of the infrastructure rather than a private property by property management of the individual systems. Next slide, please. And it also will allow the townships to identify for like new residential subdivisions where they will be permitted and where they'll be required to be on communal services and where they can be used to achieve greater density, particularly in their settlement areas. Next slide, please. So specifically, the policy itself, there's quite a bit of description, but when you get right down to the actual policies, again, these are more enabling in nature. So they are intended to provide some broad direction to the 4 townships for them to have a conversation at the local level about what they need to put in their official plans. So the direction it gives is in terms of the conversation they need to have is looking at specific settlement areas in their communities where communal services should be required, how communal services can be used to create new forms of housing, and whether different types of housing are required in different areas. So again, not having large estate residential lots in your hamlets and villages, but having something that's a little bit more compact form, and including some policies about the scale and the density of development. Next slide, please. Also having a conversation about where within your rural areas would you want to see communal services used, and what type of scale and density of development would you allow? So an example of that would be somebody comes in and says, I have 100 acres of land. I'd like to build 250 houses. So again, is that appropriate? Are they creating a complete community? Is it a new settlement area? Would you want to see something of that scale just landed in the middle of wherever, depending on access to services. So there's an opportunity now before things get really out of the gate for each of the townships to have that conversation about the different scenarios of how somebody would come forward and propose to do something on communal services and what the townships would find acceptable. Another conversation for the townships to have would be how would they see communal services being used with respect to waterfront development. Again, if you have somebody proposing a subdivision or a plan of condominium that is on a waterfront development, if they can do one sort of communal septic treatment system that is set as far away from the water as possible, is that preferable than everybody having their own individual septic system for, say, a lakefront type development? And then also too, we would be looking for the townships to have a conversation and identify the types of studies and plans that they would require a developer to submit so that that developer would prove that the project is appropriate and that there would be no negative impacts. So the policies we're proposing today are enabling in nature. They don't get down into the weeds and the details at all. Those are conversations we're going to expect that the townships will have at their council tables and with their staff. And I think the next slide is just in terms of questions. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions from the committee as well as any from the public if I'm able to. Thanks.
Okay, Mike, you get to start.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonia. That's very enlightening. Just a question. I see that most of this, if not all, is geared towards new construction, new development. What about existing construction? If supposedly a certain road with 5, 6, 10, 20 houses or villages on it, I'm talking like in the north, and they decide voluntarily they want to participate in this community, will that be accessible to them?
Through you, Madam Chair. Certainly, yes, another option. I mean, we have sort of geared this towards sort of new development, but another conversation for the municipalities to have is where might they use this for existing development, like you said. And again, so new development, the standard phrase is new development needs to pay for itself, right? So if somebody is building something new, that developer and those people living there would bear those costs. If you extend it to an existing village, that's entirely possible, but that is something that the municipality, along with the affected landowners, would have to have a conversation about, because there would have to be some conversation about how those costs would be covered. Again, the nice way of doing it with a public utility in place is that through billing, you can spread a cost out over a period of time without and maybe with just like a little bit upfront, rather than everybody paying a huge amount all upfront. So you're quite right that having that conversation too about what happens if an existing neighborhood comes forward and wants to do this, it's entirely feasible technically. It's just a matter of those residents or those business owners having that conversation with the township to see how best financially to implement it.
Just a follow-up question. So if there is a new development within an existing development, then how would that apply? The new development only will be connected to this communal system, whereas the neighboring existing houses or businesses will still be running on their own septic or their own systems, right?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. So technically that's correct. The nice thing about these systems is that they are, I know Mr. Gallivan has referred to them as they're like Lego blocks, right? So if a developer comes in, they build a new development, it's serviced by communal. The area where the buildings are for all the communal infrastructure is taken over by the public utility. And then there's a desire to add on to that in order to service some of the existing area. Again, that's entirely possible and feasible. It's just a matter of planning for that in terms of the space for the infrastructure and financially how you spread out the fees for that so that they are fair. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, Sonia, Sharbot Lake is a good example of that. We have a piece of property right in the village, and we want to put seniors housing on it. Just down the street is our township hall, and there's also churches that are on holding tanks that if we had this system, it would seem quite natural that the community hall for one would be hooked into the system, but there are other commercial uses that may want to be hooked in as well. It's a very compact little village, small lots, lots of holding tanks because septic tanks just won't fit anymore. More questions or comments? Judy.
Few times. Okay, thank you very much. And through you, Madam Chair, just to build on that question, that just to be crystal clear, the developer would be the one initially buying the units and having them all installed depending on their proposed development, or is the municipal corporation expected to do that piece?
So through you, Madam Chair, no, so the onus would be on the developer to do the installation and to do that payment upfront. Now, my understanding at the last county council meeting, we are looking to create sort of an advisory group or task force to advise the new municipal services corporation to come up with some best practices. And I think what would happen to start out, we're probably, again, knowing that there are different types of technology out there. I think the discussions that I've heard so far is that the utility would probably pick a small handful of different companies and their technologies that have proven themselves to be reliable, and a developer would be required to consult as part of pre-application consultation that we do for all of our developments, would also have to consult with the utility, and they would only be able to become part of that utility if they use technology that the utility agreed with. And then what would happen is the developer would pay for it, they would install it. And we've generally learned that if there are going to be problems with the system, they're going to show themselves within the first couple of years of operation. So the utility could start billing, but the infrastructure itself would still be owned by the developer for about the first 2 years. And then there would be a review of it to see its condition before it was transferred over to be owned by the utility. So yes, as much as possible, we want that infrastructure and the costs associated with it to be borne by the developer and not the utility, and certainly not the community.
Right. So going back to the example of Sharpert Lake, and that when there's already established places that might want to be able to hook into that new system. What is the mechanism, or is there a mechanism for that at this point?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't really have an answer for that, because that is something that the regional utility would have to look at, because presumably you couldn't hook in until it was owned by the public utility.
Yeah.
And then the public utility would have to be satisfied that whatever the capacity or the volume, additional volume coming in, it could be handled by the system. Did the system need to be added to? So that is an analysis that would have to be done by the utility, likely in consultation with the municipality at the time.
Okay. And on that note, for the liability, you outlined where the impediments had been in the past, and that with the concern that things could get downloaded. This new corporation that the County of Frontenac doesn't have a voting right to, but I assume has already collected the funds for the setting up of it, because it was outlined in the communal services report a few years back as to what the expenditures would be for getting that technical expertise involved.
So through you, Madam Chair, I don't think Mr. Pender is here yet out of his other meeting. So my understanding is that all 4 townships have agreed to be part of the corporation. There were fees associated with membership, I guess, based on a property assessment. So a certain percentage is owed. And I believe that the amount to be paid by each township is spread out over a period of 5 years. So that is how the initial setup monies will come for the creation of the utility.
That's the word I was looking for, will come. So I wondered whether they had been paid in advance
No,
during any of this. So
no, but we have set money aside for that over the years. Some of us have, not all of us, to
Okay.
be ready for when it does come. Mike?
I still have more questions after.
Just a follow-up question on what Judy was asking. So what I understand is that the developer will decide on which technology to use. At the end, this public utility will be managing different technologies in different areas. If a certain developer decides to go with technology X and another developer decides to go with technology Y, the utility will be managing different technologies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's correct. And I think that that's why, at least at the outset, we would probably be limiting it to just a few, again, so that there are similarities, but there are differences, right? So to help with the management and operation, that's why there's been the discussion about limiting to a couple of different technologies to start. Yes.
Okay, back to you, Judy.
Okay, so just being clear on the money aspect, because I always like to track the money, because it said in the report, no financial impact, which isn't really the case. It's no immediate financial impact right now, but it is an investment, and that's coming forward. What skin in the game does the county have with this?
So through you, Madam Chair, I think this is getting to a point where it's outside my ability to
Okay.
answer and the scope of the proposal. So the proposal is to include these enabling policies. And the reason the report said that there was no financial impact is that the approval or adoption of these policies into the official plan, there is no financial impact with respect to the adoption. So I just want to be careful because I'm not an expert in all of the background research that's been done or the corporation being formed. So happy to take questions back to those who have the appropriate answers. So
I just want to ask Jim, because he sat on this
Mhm.
committee as well. Do you want to make a comment, Jim?
Firstly, I want to congratulate all the municipalities and the county planning staff for getting to this point today. I think my first meeting was with a group of developers, Joe and probably, I don't know who else was there, likely Kelly, in about 2014, where we wanted to find out at the county level why nobody was doing any development close to the existing municipalities. So all our existing urban municipalities, developers were steering away from there because they didn't want to put communal services in, and we wanted to find out why. That in turn became a technical advisory committee, which I sat on, and we were probably 6 years going through the process to come up with the idea of a utility company. The next step is to create the planning tools to allow this to happen, to create a utility company to allow it to happen. But now I think they're also in the process of forming a technical advisory committee that's going to get into the weeds and deal with all of the questions, except perhaps the financial side of it, that everybody's been asking. What type of systems would be approved? What type of piping system is going to be acceptable? We don't want to have 15 different systems with 15 different little developments and a whole lot of different parts and supplies and expertise required. So that's the next step in the process. And actually the county is looking for people to be on that committee now. So if anybody's interested in that, that would be an opportunity to be in that technical advisory committee. But I commend everybody getting to this point. I think this is probably one of the first municipalities in Ontario that has went to the effort to achieve this goal. And I think it's something we all should be proud of.
It's taken us a long time to get to this point, but we're here. Judy.
Okay, on that note regarding the technical expertise and that, one of the things that I've learned about, even in our little sortie down to one of the companies that potentially could be involved, is that there's maintenance companies that look after the running of these equipment. So I'm just wondering, from the technical perspective, are we really actually setting up a utility company, or are we having a governance board that issues
Again,
contracts?
those are questions that are not really determining this amendment.
Right,
I
but
think
asked-
that's more technical questions down the road.
Okay, but just since it was generic, have you got any questions? That's one of my questions along that line. And that because it does strike back then eventually to the funding aspect, if we're hiring people with great expertise, or if we're doing a contract with a company that
I would think
actually
it would
does
be a contract. But again, the Municipal Service Corporation will be looking after that stuff.
Okay, and when you were talking about the fit and the density in that, are you going to be leading the councils of the township to make sure our building codes that may say you have to build a 1,100 square foot home can get shrunk down to allowing for tiny homes and things of that nature, or am I mistaken on that?
Through you, Madam Chair, certainly, well, for North, Central and the islands that we assist with the day-to-day planning services, we're more than happy to help have that conversation. I do understand that like the size restrictions, those are starting to disappear from most municipalities' zoning bylaws. But we will be coming back specifically to the islands on October 18th for a conversation just about planning and all things that we want to work with you folks on. But yeah, certainly as part of the conversations that each of the townships need to have with their planning teams, everything from residential development to commercial, different types of residential. Those are all conversations that we didn't feel that it was appropriate for the county to tell the townships how each of their villages should develop. So that's why these policies are quite broad. And then for those of us that are doing the work in some of the townships, we will be coming out in the not too distant future and having those detailed conversations with you.
Okay, we should see if there's anybody online who has questions. Judy, do you have any more?
Just one final one.
Okay.
I know when the group was being considered to be set up, it'd be a mix of technicians and representation from the townships, and the proposal was that the mayors would be sitting on it. Has that changed, or is it?
No.
So it's still the mayors. Okay.
Still the same.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, is there anybody online who wishes to speak?
Through you, Chair, I'll ask if anyone online can raise their hand in the next minute here or so, and I will allow them in. If not, we will move on from that portion.
We have a few visitors here as well. Is there anyone that would like to ask a question or talk to us about anything you've heard? Yes. Could I have your name and where you live?
My name is Jessica. I live in Loyalist currently, but I own property in South Frontenac. Sorry, no, Stone Mills. It's in Stone Mills. It's right at the border. So I'm just wondering, you spoke about like having different technologies and different programs. I feel like it will probably get really messy. I've done a tech program out west, and it's there's a lot of quality control things that are different for each one. And I don't know if the having several different things in each township or across the board to be feasible for this utility company to manage. So maybe there is a better way of requiring what the developer has to do on their end so that you come up with one system and that everyone is familiar with one system. And that's just kind of what the developers have to do. I know now, like we have to put in wells. I'm working on a development between Camden East and Newburgh, and we're required to put every single well on every single lot, and we're required to test it before we can even sell a lot. So it's the same. I mean, it might just have to be the same sort of thing. Like this is the system you have to put in because we're not going to manage 6 different systems. I don't know that there's enough money if you're just charging it like the utility prices. You don't want to be astronomical for your commercial or your residential uses. And in order to keep that in check, it might just be like, this is a system that we require that you put in, and that's that.
And
I
that
might not like the cost at the end of the day as a developer. I might not like the cost of the system that you guys choose, but if everything is vetted properly and those are the systems that work the best, and they are like Lego blocks. If we want to build, we can put another block there, and it's easier to incorporate in Charlotte Lake. We'll throw in these municipal or communal buildings, and then the next thing you know, we have 6 units of houses that want to come in on it. Like if we pick a system that works like that effectively, is easy to maintain, then that will keep the cost down to the end user as well.
And that may in fact be what the technical committee decides, and we will take that under advisement. But I think for this amendment, those technical questions need to come down the road more so than at this meeting today.
Sure.
But certainly thank you for your comments.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Yes, your name, please.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. John Williamson, I chair the Cataract Resource Water Protection Committee. I don't see any mention of it in there. I see where the plans is pretty short paragraph about doing studies and investigations, but these become a municipal well because the municipality owns them through that corporation. And so you're caught up in the same legal entity as we did at Sydenham, for instance, or the city of Kingston water intakes. So I just want to make sure that those studies are built into as a township or townships, that you make the developer do those studies, pay for it, that you're not on the hook for them subsequently. When the other existing ones did it, we had provincial money to do it all, but that's all gone now. So you want to make sure that's built into the developer.
Okay, Sonia?
Great. Thank you through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, there are provincial regulations that have to be met when you're putting these kinds of systems in. And certainly it's just spoken to very broadly there, but anything with respect to environmental protection or source water protection, those studies would be required to be done by the developer. They would probably be peer reviewed by the townships at the developer's expense. So the cost would be borne by the developer and not by the community.
Yes. Okay, thank you. All right. Anything else? If not, we will close the public meeting. And I think I have something I have to say after. There is. The public meeting is now concluded. I would remind any persons wishing to receive additional information to provide their full name, address, and postal code to the clerk prior to leaving the meeting today. County staff will prepare a report for consideration by the Planning Advisory Committee at a future meeting, and the committee will then make recommendations to County Council. So we will move back to our agenda now. And we need a motion to adopt the agenda.
That the agenda for the October 4th, 2023 meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee be adopted. We just need a mover and a seconder for that.
And moved by Philip and seconded by Judy. Discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Is there any disclosure, pecuniary interest, or general nature thereof of any item on today's agenda by any member of the committee? Seeing none, we'll note that in the minutes. And a motion to accept the minutes of the previous meeting.
That the minutes of the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee meeting held August 16th, 2023 be adopted.
Moved by Mike, seconded by Jim. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. No deputations or presentations, briefings, reports. Sonia, I believe this one is for you as well.
We just need a mover and a seconder for the motion, and then we can get into discussions. But I'll
Okay.
just read the thing. So be it resolved that the County of Frontenac Planning Advisory Committee recommends to County Council that the draft bylaw included as attachment 1 to report number 2023-109, adopting official plan amendment number 3 to the County of Frontenac official plan to recognize the use of communal water and wastewater services for the new development across Frontenac County be approved, and that the official plan of the County of Frontenac as amended be further amended as per the draft bylaw in attachment 1 to report 2023-109, being official plan amendment number 3 for the County of Frontenac official plan.
Okay, mover, Fred, seconded by Leona. Discussion. All those in favor? Carried. And staff briefing on the next section, business plan. This is Sonia and Richard.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning again. We're tag teaming this one. We send regrets from Mr. Gallivan. He is attending the County Planning Directors of Ontario Conference right now, so he's left this in our hands. So it has been past practice, I guess, when this committee was 2 separate committees, that we would present our draft business plan to those committees before they were presented to council. So we are presenting today our draft business plan for 2024 through 2028. Just at a high level, thank you, Brianna, she's already moved it on. In terms of our overall objectives as a department, of course, we integrate both land use planning and economic development. Not all municipalities or counties combine these departments. We're a little bit more unique in that we do, and it allows us to deal do quite a bit more collaboration, particularly when new businesses come to town. They often need information about land use, zoning, other development issues. Of course, our department is also responsible for implementing all of the regional strategic policies that we do across the county, as well as developing and supporting innovative regional projects that help to improve Frontenac County, such as communal services, which we just discussed. We also work collaboratively with our member townships to enhance service levels. And of course, managing workload capacity is always something that's in the forefront of our minds as well. Next slide, please. So it is one of our objectives from the planning side to always provide sound planning opinions to both county and township councils. On the economic development side, our team is there to engage and support our businesses as well as attract new businesses, residents, and visitors to Frontenac County. We have been using the themes that have been identified in the Charter for Economic Development to focus our economic development activities. And we are also responsible for managing and developing the KNP Trail as a strategic economic development resource. So from the planning side of things, if we could just go ahead 2 slides, I think. Thank you. So again, as I mentioned, on a planning scale, we deal with our regional planning for the county as a whole. We also work with our townships to plan and deliver good services, planning services, and growth opportunities. So we do the day-to-day planning for North Frontenac, Central Frontenac, and Frontenac Islands. And we also work on a number of initiatives with the planning department at South Frontenac as well. We collaborate with the economic development side of our team, and we try to come up with a planning system that is consistent across the region and is relatively as easy as possible to access for our citizens. Next slide, please. So in terms of achievements over this past year, of course, there has been with communal services, the endorsement by all 4 townships and the county of the Municipal Services Corporation. We have continued to respond to continued changes to the Planning Act. So that has taken up some of our time as well. We did a review of planning fees for the townships. I know I'm going to be returning to Central and the Islands in the hopes to increase revenue with respect to the applications that are coming into those townships. We are currently undertaking some community engagement on the future uses of the Charlotte Lake School site. So the survey that they had got 884 responses. So it's going to take us a little bit more time to do the summary than I originally thought, but we'll be reporting back to that Township Council later this fall. And we've had a relatively high volume that has continued with respect to our planning applications. So next slide, please. So just a little bit in terms of statistics, we will, by the end of the year, of course, we'll update everybody in terms of where our 2023 numbers are. But you can see that the trend over the past, 7 years has been an increase with respect to the number of applications. And this would be specific to those that we deal with for North, Central, and the Islands. I know South Frontenac has also continued to deal with a high volume of applications, probably equal to the other 3 in total as well. So both of our departments have been very busy with respect to development applications. In terms of application numbers here, you can see the peak was definitely in 2021 at the height of the pandemic when nobody could travel anywhere. They instead decided to improve properties, buy cottages, and so forth. So this year, right now for 2023, at the end of September, we're at about 64% of our 2022 numbers. So I don't see it getting as high again as it did in 2021, but I don't think we're going to go back to pre-pandemic levels. I think we as the county have been found out as a destination, and I think we're going to continue to see people making improvements to properties and buying cottages and whatnot. So next slide, please.
Can we just have a question in between?
Yeah.
Could you just clarify that 2018 number and that for the blending it seems to be with?
I apologize. I don't have that number, and I think it's 24 and 25 or 24 and 26. Yeah, my apologies. We'll look into doing that. And that's slide number 8. Oh, he's the okay. No, we'll look into that. That could be a bit clearer for sure. Thank you.
Ed, Fred?
Through you, Madam Chair. Are you actively working with the townships to reduce the amount of actual committee of adjustment and planning appearances that have to go before that committee? And to what benefit would that be?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's a good question. So I know the Township of South Frontenac, since the beginning of the pandemic, has had delegated authority for undisputed consents. And it has worked very well for them. So we have been working on something similar. We came to the North Frontenac Township Council a few weeks ago and presented a report about the delegated authority for undisputed consents and got permission from that council to proceed to prepare a bylaw. And then, so we've actually just met with the township staff because with the bylaw, we have to change notices and some of the forms and everything. So that is definitely in the works. And we're going to be going out and having that same conversation with Central Frontenac and with the islands. But with that comes the need to modify some of the fees. So some of the new fees we've proposed have taken delegated authority into consideration, the need to potentially hold a public meeting if it is a disputed consent. But the idea behind the delegated authority and for consents, you have to give notice, but it has to just be notice about the consent. You don't have to hold a public meeting for consents. So the process would be, it would still be circulated for public comment, but if there are no comments or there are no concerns or if something does come up that can be worked out, it can be delegated authority to staff. So you're not waiting for that meeting that only happens once a month. And also we still have to do a review and do a memo to the clerk or CAO, whoever ends up being the approval person, but it's not the same lengthy report. We don't have to do presentation slides. So there's a time savings for us as staff. There's a cost savings to the township who employ us through your service agreement, and there's a time savings for the applicant.
Yeah, one of the concerns I've heard about is that there's no personal contact between the planning committee, the committee of adjustments and planning with the public, and who's actually doing the inspection of the sites. Are you going to eliminate the people from the adjustment and planning committee, or how are you going to work that out?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the way that process would work is that it would no longer be the committee doing any of the work. So the staff would do the site visit and they would do all the work. The only time it would go to the committee is if it were disputed in some sense and needed to go to them, which, our hope is that since the pandemic, we've seen committee of adjustment agendas grow considerably in terms of the number of files they have to deal with. And many of them are very routine in nature. So our intent is to try and remove those routine consents down to the staff level to allow the committee to focus on applications that are more difficult or that are more contentious. So yeah, the decision would be made by council that these types of consents would be dealt with by staff. If they end up being disputed, then they would go to the committee.
So there would still be a committee of adjustment. It's not doing away with committee of adjustments.
That's correct.
It's just taking the easy ones and having staff deal with those, and committee would still deal with the contentious ones.
Yeah, like when somebody buys a property and they find out that their driveway is 2 feet onto their neighbor's property and they don't want to rebuild the driveway, they just want to do a lot addition. And I am pretty sure that the committee members sit there and go, why are we having a meeting about this? Because nobody complains. The other efficiency that I will point out is that we are moving ahead with the community planning permit system for development on waterfront. We have drafted an RFP that we're about to share with our township staff, and that the community planning permit system is a planning tool that combines zoning, minor variance, and site plan control, along with a couple tools from the Municipal Act, which are tree preservation, tree bylaws, and site alteration, and puts it all into one tool. And the municipality can also decide that through that permitting system, there can be different scales of permits, right? There can be really minor things that then just get developed or just get sent to staff for approval. And then the more larger scale items would go still to council. So it's a very good tool, particularly for shoreline development. So that's where we're going to try it out. And that is something that you'll see us moving forward with next year. And ultimately, again, that creates some efficiencies because you're going one approval process if needed, but often, again, if they meet certain criteria, they don't even need to wait for a committee or council meeting. it would just be an approval from staff and then they would move straight to the building permit system. So we have been trying a number of things with respect to efficiencies and different ways of doing things to try and make things as efficient as possible for everybody, but still making sure we're doing good planning. So.
Okay, let's
Sure.
move on.
Okay, so in terms of our township planning work, again, as I mentioned, the application numbers are not returning to pre-pandemic levels. So we're still managing fluctuating volumes. In terms of official plan reviews, we've been involved with South Frontenac's review of their and creation of their new official plan. So we continue to be involved with that. As I said, we're heading to the islands shortly to have a conversation with them. That will include a discussion about the need for them to have a new official plan as well. And other major projects that we're working on for the townships, implementation of the Marysville Secondary Plan. We've partnered with the School of Planning at Queen's University right now. They are doing some research on best practices for design standards for the village. So we're looking forward to the outcome of that. We did participate in the housekeeping amendments that Central undertook, as well as assisting some housekeeping amendments to the zoning bylaw for North Frontenac as well. And then, as I mentioned, we've been undertaking some public consultation about future uses for the school site in Sharbert Lake. In terms of county planning work, again, we're going to continue to see things happening and change and evolve as communal services rolls out. We do have funding for the natural heritage study, so we have not been able to start that yet, but we do hope to get that underway in the near future. So that will be looking at a different way of a longer term vision in terms of how to protect natural heritage as opposed to the current model used by the province, something that looks 100 years out and is ensuring that we're protecting, what is unique and valuable about Frontenac. And that will inform our update to our official plan as well for the county. I just mentioned the community planning permit system that will be starting next year. So we are working together with our townships to create a template, and then that template would then go to each of the townships for them to do some additional consultation with their communities and refinement so that it reflected what they wanted for their communities. We have population projections. We update those every 5 years so that we're making sure that we're using the most recent census data, which again is on a 5-year cycle. And then we're also assisting the economic development team with their work on a regional community improvement plan. As I said, we're heading into a time where we're going to be needing to look at our county official plan and doing an update to that. And then, of course, we are the approval authority for plans of subdivision and condominium. And of course, one of the unknowns right now is what is going to happen with that level of application activity once communal services comes online.
Judy, did you have a question?
Just regarding the natural heritage study and that, and considering the natural environment of the Frontenac Islands in particular, when we're looking at an official plan that might get done before the natural study, it seems problematic because there are pushes, of course, and that don't have 100-year view of preserving nature and fisheries and habitat and things of that nature. So I'm just wondering, how soon is your natural heritage study getting a rollout? And can we maybe make sure that that is tied closer to our official plan review?
We do the best we can with timing, but we do have limited staff and resources. So if there is a study that comes out, we end up having to go back and update documents. We do that as well. As for when, probably next year. Exactly when, I don't have a specific date at this time. So, okay, next slide, please. So in terms of risk analysis and mitigation on the planning side of things, again, there's always the potential for delays to timelines. So the volume of applications that we've received for the 3 townships that we do, again, have been pretty steady and certainly higher than pre-pandemic levels. And we, of course, with the changes that have been happening at the provincial level, there is a need to have a more stricter adherence to application processing timelines. So again, in terms of mitigating this, we already have some things underway. Moving ahead with the community planning permit system for at least waterfront developments to start. The ability to delegate some planning approvals for things that are straightforward to staff. And then we have been working with staff within each of the 3 township offices to make some internal process improvements for when they're receiving and reviewing and processing planning applications. Next slide, please. Delays to strategic initiatives. This continues to be sort of our biggest concern, is that we have major policy reviews that continue to get delayed, such as the natural heritage strategy. In a perfect world, we would spend 50% of our time doing regional policy planning for the county. Last year was the first time we've cracked 10% in a long time, and it was only 11%. And so that means even some things that we like to help the townships do, like those housekeeping updates of your zoning bylaw and the consolidations, those keep getting pushed off as well. So, I mean, the mitigation to that is that the townships may need to retain consultants to do some of that policy work, depending on our workload. And I know Central did look to hire a consultant to help update their zoning bylaw. We, of course, provided input, but we're not in a position at that time to have been able to project manage that for them. So that is something to just, again, to be cognizant of. And then next slide. So in terms of our reserve for planning projects, we usually draw from the sustainability reserve. This just shows here the use for the last couple of years and sort of the projection up until 2028. Currently, the one project proposed to be that has been allocated from the reserve already is the natural heritage study. The one outlier with respect to costs related to this reserve is if county planning staff have to attend an Ontario Land Tribunal hearing on behalf of any application that is related to county approval. So official plan amendments and plans of subdivision in particular. And with that, I think you've heard enough from me this morning. I'll turn it over to Mr. Allen.
Thank you. So we spoke a lot about a lot of the ideas that we want to implement, new ideas that we want to implement into our business plan at our last meeting. We had several reports about projects that would influence the budget process for county council, and we'll be taking some of those projects forward. But our general plan for the next 4 years is based on what we have in front of us now. So we currently have a Charter for Economic Development that was established in 2015, which is the basis of what we're doing in terms of economic development efforts. So trips and trails trails is a core part of our department, but trips, vacations, visitors has also grown in terms of what it matters to our economic development efforts here in Frontenac County. Then growing food and beverage, both from supporting agriculture to helping new food and beverage businesses become established in the region. It has been also a key pillar of what we do. And then our recreation lifestyle, so promotion of the Frontenac lifestyle with access to natural beauty, is this idea of working from home. We established this before COVID made it popular, and so we continue to do that work, and we had some discussions about that at our last meeting. Next slide, please. Just in reference to the charter, we have conducted consultation and have some recommendations to update the charter, and this committee will be looking at that shortly as part of our a larger project. We did some work in consultation with businesses and township stakeholders. It'll look very similar, but something that will likely join the charter once we have some discussions with the committee and council is housing, and from an economic development side, not just the planning side of the department. And so we engage in these 6 kind of core activities when we do in our department over the course of a year. We provide support to businesses. We work on investment attraction, which is relatively new for our team. Destination management or tourism. Open farms deserves its own attention. The KNP Trail deserves its own attention. And then obviously we have administration, business planning reports, all of that we do on a regular basis. I put grants down there too. Next slide, please. So in terms of providing business support, this year we sort of met our goal in terms of getting out there and supporting the community through an annual business survey that we do at the beginning of each year, establishing weekly communications with businesses on a consistent basis through our email newsletter. We hosted an experience workshop for businesses that were interested in developing tourism experiences, and we've seen results from that. Actually, the Canadian Handy Woman has started offering experiences since she attended that workshop. We did a tour familiarization. So when you see the word FAM, it's a familiarization tour of Wolf Island with a number of tourism staff from Kingston as well as Frontenac County to help people understand what there is to do on the other side of the ferry ride, and to encourage people to not just ride the ferry, but to engage in the various experiences available there. We'll be doing our second annual business awards in November. And then we also, so far this year, have responded to about 75 requests for support from businesses. And that could be providing them with made local tags to helping them find out what their property is zoned. So the business support requests could cover a lot of ground. Next year, we plan to do the same. As we go forward, we'd like to increase the opportunities to connect in person with our businesses as we sort of emerge from the COVID years, as we might call it. And so that's sort of how we want to kind of stick with the status quo for providing support to the business community. Next slide, please. In terms of investment attraction, we've been working for the last 2 years on a community improvement plan strategy, and we'd like to implement that, which requires some official plan amendments and working with the various planning and policies to do so. A community improvement plan is a way that we might be able to provide incentives for businesses or developers to make investments, private investments that are in line with our goals and strategies. And so that's how the community improvement plan will look. And we'll have a big meeting to talk about what that strategy looks like before it becomes policy at this committee. We're also continuing to look at our neighboring land use policies around the trail, which we discussed very early this year. And then we're hoping to engage in a trails market readiness assessment for the KNP and investment attraction plan using Trans-Canada Trail as a template. And I've got a bit of information about that later in the business plan here. Actually, in the KNP Trail business plan, which I'm not bringing here, but I'm bringing to council. I'm sorry about that. You'll get next year's KNP Trail business plan. So, and then we also talked about physician recruitment, and really we're looking at medical professionals recruitment when we talk about that, based on the direction that was given by the committee last meeting. Next slide, please. So the community improvement plan, our goal is to have the approval completed by county council by early next year. So you should see this in the next couple of months. It's the idea is to offer incentives that promote the type of development that we're looking for. For example, if we're looking for housing, how do we get people to convert existing vacant spaces into rental properties? Can we offer some tax credits or grants in order to help encourage those kinds of opportunities to take place? So that's an example of what we might be looking at in this plan. We've almost firmed it up, and so we'll talk about it when we bring it forward in the next few months. Next slide, please. In terms of tourism, this year we developed the tourism brand standards, which gives us a better way to to understand how we talk about our story. I believe you all have a copy of the standards in front of you. And so the next effort is to educate our business community about those standards and how they can tie into the movement about celebrating Frontenac. I would say that since we initially developed our brand in 2016, people found us because our planning applications have gone through the roof. I don't know if I could take full credit for that, but maybe there's a piece there. We've evolved Open Farms, and you've been following along in that process as we created a dedicated website for Open Farms. We're just in the week 5 of 6 in terms of Open Farms this year, and we'll be bringing a report later this year on how that went. But it's been we think it's been a significant achievement to establish this new Open Farms website and platform for people to find agricultural experiences over the period of this year. So next year we're looking to do a website refresh, which we spoke about at our last meeting, and implement the destination development plan, which is another way of saying hire somebody to lead tourism in Frontenac County. This slide sort of speaks to that as we have our project proposals coming to County Council about both of those things, and which this committee spoke about with me in August, in terms of the destination development plan and the tourism website. Next slide, please. Open Farms. Today, we launched our website in early August, and we had 79 event listings, including farmers markets. We had 18 farms, businesses, and community groups on there as well. We had a variety of experiences, such as Learn How to Grow Things, which is taking place at the Storrington Center later this week. Later today, and we had Meet a Farmer take place 2 weeks ago, but we're expecting that was a very successful event. Open Farms still takes a lot of our time, and it's just, we're hoping that now that the website is built, it may reduce our commitment, but part of putting something of this scale on, it requires managing partnerships and relationships with our other organizations. And it requires a constant contact with all of the farms and farmers markets and local food businesses that we work with. And so that just requires time. And I don't think it's a bad thing to talk about. It's just important that the committee and council be aware that we do commit significant resources towards open farms and celebrating local food and agriculture each year. Next slide, please. In terms of missed opportunities, we're growing. And so there's a lot of demand for us to do more and be more involved. And so we our successful familiarization tours naturally get other areas or businesses saying, well, hey, can we do that over in our part of Frontenac County? Can we do that too? Can we do one every year? And so we'd like to be able to offer that, in different areas, or offer multiple in a year if we could. Film and television development, I haven't spoken too much about that with this committee, but previous to this term of council and this term of this committee, we were working closely with the film office in Kingston to establish a location database in across Frontenac County to lure some of the film productions that are going to Kingston out to do scenes in the county as well. And then we're looking to provide more support to doctor recruitment, let's call it medical professional recruitment, additional agricultural initiatives such as farm familiarization tours. We actually ended up doing one of those this year, but after I built these slides, and there seems to be another popular activity for us to engage in. Obviously, the destination development plan was approved in 2022, and we haven't begun significant implementation of that yet. And if we and we've been delayed in the completion of the countywide community improvement plan, mostly in the same way that the planners have their day-to-day kind of getting in the way of some of the more regional policy building, where our day-to-day of managing trails or running our existing programs, it makes it hard to follow on those strategic initiatives. So that establishes this as a risk. If we want to keep doing everything we're doing and more, we need to grow the team. And we spoke about this at length and had a great discussion about this in August. And so we'll be proposing to County Council that we hire an additional community development officer so that we can we can lead the implementation of the destination plan and continue to deliver on our other commitments in our department. We'll continue to make use of our project management contractor who assists us with trail management and maintenance, but there's a lot of policy work around trails that has to happen, and that still has to stay with me in our department and not have an outsider doing that. And then one of the options that we're going to look at is increasing our summer student staff complement to help us with the face-to-face efforts that we engage in on a regular basis. We also have a reserve for our projects. We established it as part of how we got our original community development officer was a significant grant through the Rural Economic Development Program in 2016 and in 2017. That grant lasted for 3 years and allowed us to establish the position of the community development officer. And in order to transition that community development officer onto like our full-time payroll, we established this reserve to carry on some of the projects that were established there. And that includes paying for the signs that we have on the 401 and Highway 7 through to the Ministry of Transportation, in Frontenac, or now visit frontenac.ca website. All those are funded through through this reserve as it continues forward. We have identified the implementation of the countywide community improvement plan as coming from this reserve, as well as the tourism website refresh to come from this reserve as we go forward. Our reserve is a little bit smaller than the sustainability reserve, but we're not planning to go to the OLT anytime soon. So I have been, it's true. So I'll just take it from your reserve. All right, next slide, please.
Right.
Sorry. I'm looking at this on the next previous slide.
Yeah.
It looks like the reserve is really going down quick from 2023. When you get to 2029, it's in 2028, it's really low. Is that reserve going to be replenished? Is that money going to be gone?
Yeah, so we'll have to take a look at whether or not we need to change how we replenish it. It gets replenished annually, so there's a certain commitment in every budget to add to that reserve. The projections around that reserve are based around a slow increase to the community improvement plan. So a certain amount of money would be set aside from the reserve to fund the community improvement plan, but council could decide to take a different approach to funding the community improvement plan. So my recommendation, my projections, is to fund some of that plan from this reserve, some of the incentives from that plan from this reserve. So we'll bring a conversation to county council specific to the reserve along with the treasurer, because reserve policy is more of a county council
We have
piece.
2 days in October to talk dollars.
Yeah.
Just one other thing, the community development officer you're speaking about, this would be a new position. Is it your intent to run everything through your department rather than relying on some other outside sources that might be able to contribute and help manage things like the KMP Trail?
So yeah, it is our intention to continue to work with partners, but to provide leadership from our department. I think we have in the past, in terms of trails, worked with partners and moved too quickly in terms of providing full oversight without knowing what we wanted and our expectations of that to other entities. And so we have to make sure we have strong policies and operations in place, and that when we entertain having another organization assist us with that, it's very clear to them what our expectations are. And so otherwise, the risk is that the trail may not be maintained to the quality that we're looking for, or the inspections aren't taking place on a regular basis as according to our policies. And so we've had difficult experiences trying to get on the same page with other organizations that are involved in this in the past. So we want to make sure that we have more stake in the game. Now, we've had conversations with the public works departments, the various townships, about where they could assist. Most of them are operating at capacity too, and or don't have the appropriate equipment for our size of corridor and maintaining that corridor, and they would have to consider the larger implications of like purchasing that equipment or renting that equipment or staffing that equipment going forward. And
But
so,
Richard, I think to be clear, the community development position is
Yeah.
not just for trails.
no, so if we're looking for
It's a
adding,
small amount for trails.
it would add, I would do less in tourism, for example, and have more time to complete some of the things on trails, right? Because I tend to lead most of the trails pieces that our department takes on. And the other piece is, as we grow in trails, it's not just infrastructure that we're looking at, it's trail economy. So we're looking at, when we talk about the trail market readiness assessment, we're looking at how do we work with Trans-Canada Trail to get more people on our trail from outside the region? And what are those people expecting in terms of accommodations, in terms of amenities like washrooms, in terms of safety, or in terms of businesses to visit? Breweries I hear are popular, but that's we have one, and so that's where we've got a check mark there along the trail. So that's a piece that we want to make sure we're doing. We've looked at outsourcing tourism to other organizations, and I would say that ultimately the thing is that we do in Frontenac County very well, and we know we're not doing very well when we don't do, is we have personal relationships. We go and meet people face to face. We talk to people. We engage in the community on the ground level and the grassroots level. And once you start outsourcing that, you lose that the ability to carry that community development effort forward. And so that's ultimately, I think, the value we have to consider when we consider whether or not we want to outsource some of these things or keep it in-house.
Okay, let's go on. Judy?
Just a quick question regarding that money aspect. Have we been dependent on grants up to this point in time, provincial or federal grants, that help with this community development reserve and that? Because it seems like a natural thing that we would. And I share your concern.
One of my departmental KPIs is percentage of projects funded by grant and an amount of grant funds. So I look to try to get a minimum of $50,000 in grants each year. I exceed that usually by threefold each year at this stage. And we try to make sure that we're like that almost everything we do, it has some sort of partnership dollars coming from somewhere else. So we're always leveraging our operational dollars for marketing or for like a new program or project with grants in some way, shape, or form. But we still need the people to lead those projects in our house. And that's a lot harder to get grant money for, as people. So the reserve would be the beauty of that reserve is that when a grant comes up and it's you've got 4 weeks to turn around and it's not in your budget, that we have a place to look to match funds with on those grants. And that's where the reserve comes in handy.
And again, we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks, all of those reserve dollars.
That's right.
Okay. Onward.
This is Joe's slide generally, so we're not going to talk too deeply to it. We've hinted at all of these pieces in our discussions throughout the presentation. So if there's any questions about any of these things, we're happy to answer them, but I'm not going to go through each point.
Mike.
Yeah, I'll go back to the open farms.
Yeah.
This is the third year or the second year that it's done, right? Or it's
Six years for open farms.
Okay. Is there a tangible assessment for the growth and the success of this? Because you mentioned it's very positive. Is there a tangible way or I don't know, not money wise, but any form of KPI or any form of thing that will show the progress of success?
We're going to try to establish that. The thing is, each year the event has looked different. The first 2 years, we had farms that just opened their doors, and we just basically took our big county finger and said, go to those farms. But what happened in the second year was thousands of people descended on some of these farms, and they were overwhelmed. So we had to change our format. Then we had the pandemic, and we had to shut down, and we did some videos. So we went by social media marketing as a KPI. Last year we did ticketed events that we organized, and that was somewhat successful, but we only worked with 6 farms essentially as part of that. This year we created a platform for farms to do their own ticketed events and promote it. So we're the marketing agency, they're the event hosts, and we think that there's some tweaks to do that, but we may be able to establish some KPIs and look back at overall community engagement based on open farms. We know it has a great reputation, and I don't know how you measure reputation. Maybe we can lean on Leona for some experience on that, but it has a great reputation, and so that's why we continue to do it. But it has effectively been a very different event each of the 6 years.
Okay. This is your last slide, and there's the question slide. We won't have any because we've had them all the way through. Are there any additional questions or comments on the presentation? Okay. And again, we'll be dealing with all of this on October 24th and 25th when we look at our budgets. Okay. Thank you both. So we need a motion.
The motion is that the County of Frontenac Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee recommend to the County Council the approval of the Planning and Economic Development 2024 to 2028 business plan, and further that the Director of Planning and Economic Development provide an overview to the County Council as part of the 2024 budget deliberations, as well as the councils of the 3 municipalities which the department provides planning services.
Moved by Leona, seconded by Jim. Discussion, all those in favor. Oh, sorry, Judy, did you have something?
Option 1, continue the economic development work with existing staff, resources which will impact the delivery of economic development. And option 2 involves a budget request for the county council. So I thought we should probably make it clear that it's option 2 that the committee might be looking at to support you.
You're welcome to amend the recommendation to do so.
The motion is just recommending the report to County Council, which would include both those options.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so both of those options are in there, and then County Council will make that decision.
But can we make a recommendation as this committee?
We're approving what's been presented to us as a recommendation.
I believe last time we did approve option 2, if my recollection in the minutes of meeting last time.
Yeah, the community development officer position was recommended as part of a previous report, and so I think this was just meant to be an overview. But you had that recommendation from this committee is going to county council later this month.
Okay.
Want to make sure you're supported.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All those in favor? Carried. All right, next is communications, and this is from the Verona ATV Club regarding the trail passes. Any discussion on that? And the other one is, oh, sorry, go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, I read this letter and it sounds like they are asking to be able to sell passes for use on the trail. And I was under the impression that this trail was not going to be ran by people or organizations that are going to require passes. And one of the things that causes me a lot of concern, they were talking about $7,000 from their club for the Elbow Creek Bridge. And it's a significant amount of money, but it's not a lot of money. So if they're going to try to rely on passes, how would we be able to handle that? And then just a side note, the Verona ATV Club is part of the Ontario Federation of ATVs. And the passes that they use are those passes for the bigger organization, which means that if they're selling passes through their club for use on the KMP trail, that means that everybody, the rest of the clubs, anybody that has one of those passes can be on the trail. And is that something that we're going to accept? Or because that's a lot of wear and tear on the trail too. Just wanted to bring that out and get some clarification.
Yes, so I have direction from county council to bring the idea of passes back through this committee at some point. But I want to resolve the extension request from the same club before we engage in the discussion about passes overall, whether whose pass is appropriate, if we should have passes at all of that, the benefits and costs of doing so. There are passes required for snowmobiles to be on the KMP trail. And it's a standard practice in many other jurisdictions for motorized vehicles to have passes, but we've managed not to commit to passes in one way or another for the last few years, and we will have that discussion, but in the future.
I know the Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Clubs has a one pass system for snowmobiles, and unfortunately, there's two major passes that people purchase for ATVs, and there's two different organizations, and one is Ontario Federation of ATV Clubs, and the other one is Eastern Ontario Trails Alliance. So what I think the Eastern Ontario Trails Alliance is trying to strive for is get a system where there is a one pass system so that people like us don't have to get caught up in, differences of opinions.
Fred, my understanding is people are asked if they would buy a trail pass. They are never prohibited from using the trail if they say no. It's on an option. Jim?
Yeah, the way it currently stands now, anybody, whether they have a pass or not, with any ATV from anywhere in the world can come and use the trail through Verona or our portion of the trail. There's no limitation to people from other locations from using it, and in fact, they often do. I buy a trail pass so that I can go into other locations that do require them, and I happen to think that that is one of the key issues we need to decide before we should be making a final decision on whether ATVs be allowed to extend their use south of where they're currently allowed to extend their use. Right now, there's no methodology for virtually anybody to enforce anything for poor behavior on an ATV trail, subject to perhaps having the police try to charge them, and that's just about impossible. In Renfrew County, which I do ATV up there a fair bit, you're caught misbehaving, your trail permit is removed and you're not allowed in the trails. And that can be done by the association. So it's a deterrent. It's not the best. It doesn't work perfectly, but it does at least do something. And I think that the trail pass should be part of the discussion for whether the extension occurs or not. But that's my personal opinion, and I'll leave that to later.
So noted. Well, and as Richard said, this will be coming to council with a report. The same thing, I believe, with the access. There was a comment. People keep wondering when we're going to be dealing with it. And it's going to be December, our December meeting. We're aiming for.
No comment.
Richard, we are aiming for December.
It was my desire to have the comprehensive report with all of the requested information from the committee back to the committee so we can move forward with that discussion in December.
Right. All right. Is there anything else to come before our meeting today? If not, we need to discuss our next meeting because we have a couple of hunters in our group, and December the 6th is right in the midst of their black powder season. So we're wondering if folks could meet on the 13th instead of the 6th. That would be a week later, and it would still give time for county council to receive a report from this committee, if that would work for folks. 13th is okay, Mike? Judy, Leona? No, there'll still be, county council's the 20th, so it gives 7 days for the, okay, all right. So we have a motion moved by Phil and seconded by Judy that the next meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee is scheduled for Wednesday, December the 13th, 2023 at 10 a.m. in the Township of South Frontenac Council Chambers. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you for accommodating our hunters.
Through you, Chair, we just have one more motion. It's just the adjournment that the meeting hereby adjourn at 11:31 a.m. And I just need a mover and seconder for that.
Moved by Fred, seconded by Judy. All those in favor?